Hi everybody, and welcome to the I Rock Knits podcast. It is a newly rainy afternoon. We just had a big thunderstorm roll through with hail, and so I had to kind of postpone getting started today. So this might get up a little later than usual. My name is Cori Eichelberger, and I live in the southwest suburbs of Minneapolis, St. Paul. My daughter is a new resident of St. Paul. We got her moved in this week, and it has been kind of a stressful week at our house. I have a little bit to share. So Saturday, July 27th was my niece's wedding. It was my husband and I's job to drive to Lake City, Minnesota, pick up my mother-in-law from the nursing home where she resides, which is, she's about 2 hours from us, and then St. Peter, Minnesota, which is about another 2-hour drive. Get her to the wedding and then get her back. And on Friday, I was not feeling 100%. I had a side ache and didn't really know what it was. It was just pain on my left side. And so I just didn't think much of it. Saturday, it continued to get worse. Cody is joining us here today at the table. And we went through the wedding. We got May, picked her up. She is kind of in a wheelchair. She can take a few steps with a walker, but is pretty unsteady on her feet. And so we got done with the wedding, which was lovely. It was outside, very, very hot. So it was a very short wedding. We went back in, we ate, and I started to feel much worse. So eventually I said we needed to get her back home. Okay, I got him settled here beside me. So we didn't leave until about 8 p.m. and needed to get her back home. So it was about 10:30 when we got to Lake City, and I was laying in the back seat of the car, not feeling well at all. And we decided to continue to try to get home without going to the hospital on the way. So every town we came to, my husband would say, "There's a hospital here," and I'd say, "No, I can make it." So we eventually got to the emergency room here in our town at about 12:30 at night, and I really kind of had convinced myself that it was a kidney stone. I've never had one, but both my brothers have, and that's what they kind of tentatively diagnosed it as well. They got an IV started, and 4 doses of morphine later, I still was not feeling very well. They decided to do a CAT scan. I don't want to go, I don't even know how much to tell you guys. Anyway, I don't know what I have. I don't know what I had. I'm much better. I left the hospital that evening with the possibility of a bowel blockage. It was not a kidney stone. And so we came home at 5 in the morning. I proceeded to be very ill for a number of hours, and I slept for about 18 hours, and when I got up, I was still having pain. So back to the ER we went. We're just trying to go to urgent care, but my daughter was home, and she took me in, and they chucked me right into the ER again. This was Monday by now. They did a contrast CT, didn't see anything, and told me that it could be my back, which I have had back trouble in the past, but it's always on the opposite side. And that is not what this felt like. So he recommended an MRI, but then also said, "I'm not a back doctor, and it looks like you have, a back doctor at the TRIA," and I do. So we left the ER, and we went to the urgent care at the orthopedic center to get an MRI there. Arrived there, and the doctor was very nice and ordered the MRI right away, and then my insurance denied the MRI. I had had an MRI last November, and so they wanted their 48 hours to investigate why I needed another one. And so we came back home. At this point, I have prescriptions for oxycodone, prednisone, and a muscle relaxant, none of which I've taken because I didn't really want to take something when I didn't know what I had. So, anyway, it has just been, I am currently on the steroid. I have been back to TRIA for the MRI on Friday. It was read by the urgent care doc as a possible sciatic, sacroiliac SI joint out of alignment issue. I'm waiting to hear back from my doctor, who was on vacation last week, which was part of the problem. but I'm much better. You know what? If I had a kidney stone and it passed, I was better. If I had a bowel blockage and it passed, because we took some precautions on that route too while we were at the ER, not things you want to know about. If it's my back, whatever, I am feeling much better. I would say that I don't really have any pain left. I'm really hoping that it was just one of those things. And I will wait to hear from my back doctor to see if he thinks that I have an alignment problem. But this is not the same pain that I've had before. And the steroid is helping, although then you don't sleep. But maybe I can get a lot of knitting done this week when I take the rest of the steroid. So anyway, this is going to be a short episode because I'm not super prepared. I haven't been knitting. And I always tell my husband and my daughter, if mom's not knitting, she must not feel well. And so last night was the first time I sat down to knit, and I was going to cast on the Soldotna crop. I have not knit a Caitlin Hunter pattern. She has hundreds of beautiful patterns out there, I think, at this point. She's probably the numero uno most popular designer right now next to Hohi. And I just wanted to cast it on, but I had wound my yarn. I had bought my yarn at ZK. I don't usually talk about my whips on the podcast, but I just want to mention this, that I went out to look at other people's projects because I couldn't decide what order to use my colors in. And as I looked through the project, I realized that there was a problem, possibly with the pattern. In the picture of the Soldotna crop, the neckline is not very high. It probably sits about like this one, a little crew neck. But people's necklines were turning out much higher, almost like a turtleneck, and the on some of the project pages, especially in the smaller sizes, the short rows were from here to here instead of from here to here in the back. And so there's just a lot of notes there. If you were thinking about knitting that, you need to look at the project pages first because there are some notes there from people about the neckline on the smaller sizes. So I didn't get it cast on or started last night because I have to make some decisions on whether or not I need to make a change to the cast on number for the size that I'm going to make, which I don't think I do, but you know what? When you get late at night, that is not a good time to make knitting decisions, right? There's your tip of the week for this week, is that anytime after 10 p.m. is not probably a good time to make a knitting decision or to try to fudge a pattern or figure something out or have anything that you're really doing, because you'll probably end up ripping it out in the morning. So today I am wearing a sweater that I just kind of designed on the needles, and I will hold up the bottom part of the sweater because this is the part you don't see. So right under the bust line, this feather and fan starts, this highly variegated yarn, so it goes right from the orange into the blue. So I have my bright blue buttons and my bright blue shirt, but you can't see any of that. So I'm just going to look like a little colorful menagerie today, and you know the rule, right? Keep it colorful. I finished an audiobook in the last 2 weeks, and I really, really enjoyed it. Not the genre that I normally listen to, but it was another Alan Eskens book called The Deep Dark Descending, and it has 4 stars and 8 hours and 35 minutes, and it was narrated by R.C. Bray, who did an excellent job. This is kind of a murder mystery suspense, not scary thriller, but just like who done it and how is it going to end. So one of those kind of fast-paced, keep up, what's going on, who are these characters, what happened over here, how is that going to affect what happened over there. Very, very well written. I couldn't stop listening. I really would recommend it if you are a fan of that kind of genre. It does have the main character as the homicide detective Max Rupert, who lives in Minneapolis, so we've got that whole local connection for me, which is why I particularly like Alan Eskens' books. But this isn't out of the ordinary from the few of the other books that I have read of his. And I would think that maybe he was going to go ahead and write some more books around this character, Max Rupert. You wouldn't have to read this book, listen to this book after you've listened to the others, but I think it would help, right? Because those characters are fledged out in previous books, and then he then takes one character out of each book and writes a book about them. So you learn a lot more about Max Rupert in the other books, and would probably be nice to know before you started this one. My husband has started listening to these books and said, you know, he's really enjoying them. And so when I told him that I finished this, and he goes, well, I'll read that one next. So if you are a person in your family who has a husband or significant other, or if you are a guy watching this podcast and don't know whether or not these books would be of interest to you, I think all of the books that Alan Eskins has written would be of interest. So there's that one. Then I started a new one, and I'm almost done with it already. I'm reading Turtles All the Way Down, or listening to, I should always say, but you guys know what I mean, by John Green. I really like John Green. He is super popular young adult author, and I've read a number of his books, and I missed this one. And my daughter said, you haven't listened to Turtles yet? And I said, no, I haven't listened to Turtles. And she said, oh, it's really good, Mom. It's about a young girl with anxiety. And after our conversation last week, when I talked a lot about mental health, many of you reached out to say that you suffered from a mental health illness, or had a family member who did, or knew people in your life who did, and that the more we talk about it, I think the less stigma will be attached to that. And this girl in this book really has an anxiety issue. She has cyclical thoughts that won't stop, and so I can't recommend it for any of you who that might be a trigger to. But if you feel like you would like to read about someone who had cyclical thoughts that can't get them out of their head, constantly thinking about things that won't go away, you might really identify with this particular young lady. I mean, she happens to be a high school student, but she's just worried about everything. And I'm probably about halfway through. It's 7 hours and 12 minutes. It has 4.4 stars on Audible, and it is narrated by Kate Rudd. I'm really enjoying it. I liked several other books by John Green. I have read Paper Towns, which I really liked, The Fault in Our Stars, which is of course made into a movie, which I really enjoyed. So there are some other books out there by John Green that I could also recommend. So that's that. Those are the audiobooks for this week. I think I'm going to go ahead and put all my audiobooks that I'm listening to, that I speak to on the podcast, in one thread at the beginning of the audiobook recommendations. That way, when I put them in the show notes, they would be in the drop-down bar if you're watching this on like an iPad or something, or on your computer, my show notes, but they're not all in one place then. I just put a brief synopsis of the one, or the name and the author of the one that I'm currently reading under the show notes, so not a good place to gather them all. So I think I will change that up and put them all in one place. I'll go back to all 25 podcasts. Guys, this is episode 25. That's kind of fun. That means I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary of the podcast at the end of August. Here was the first time I sat down and finally put up a podcast after years of thinking about it. And here I am still talking 1 year later. Imagine that. The mouth has hardly ever stopped moving. So today I have 2 patterns to talk about briefly. I have Megan Williams' cool clavicle cover, so we'll start with that one. I'm just going to turn the iPad a little bit here. So this is the cool clavicle cover, and not a very good representation of it. This is by my friend Megan Williams, and it is a great shawl pattern. The pattern, cool clavicle cover. And here are a bunch of different iterations, and you can see that she does use highly variegated yarns. I just think that my red is a little too variegated. I'm going to try to hold up this stitch pattern really close so you can see here, hopefully. Too close or too far away? There are little slip stitches that go across where you carry the yarn in the front, and then there are horizontal lines on this shawl that you make when you're knitting, and it's just amazing. Maybe if I actually just show you the shape here first. So here we have a crescent shawl. It's not a giant crescent, it's not super long, but I'm just using a jewel closure, J-U-L. I've talked about these before. I have lots of them, and they just screw right into the fabric, and they have a little plastic piece on the back, so it screws right through. So that just lives in this shawl for me. That makes it wearable. It's much more like a cowl to put on. I plop it over my head and out the door I go. So if I have something that I know that I wear this with, I have several shirts that I can wear this with. Also, the edging on this is a long, flat, kind of I-cord edge. I'm not sure that that's what Megan calls it, so let me look here. It says you do a provisional cast on, you have slip stitches textured, it's top down, it's worked flat, it's a written pattern in a crescent shape. Sometimes on even the most scorching days of summer, your shoulders will get chilled. This crescent shawl is an extremely thin layer that sits nicely on your shoulders. It is light and airy, but provides enough coverage to block blasting air conditioners or combat a slight nighttime chill. Using just one skein of fingering weight yarn, this shawl works well with those single skeins that are just too gorgeous to put on your feet. The simple, textured, yet visually interesting stitch pattern knits up beautifully with variegated tonal and gradient colorways. Blocked dimensions are 16 inches deep at the deepest point, so up and down, 60 inches long, and from tip to tip is 44 inches. So she's giving all kinds of information in there. The pattern is $6, and it is by Megan Williams. Now, I'm going to take it off here and see if I can hold the stitches up a little bit so you can see them a little bit better. See this nice top edge? Isn't that interesting? It's very squishy, and it runs, perpendicular to the actual stitch pattern, which I really like. And then where is one here? There is that horizontal line. So you've got textured stitches, and then right here, see it? Boom, 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 boom. Right there is a horizontal bar, and then there's another one right down here. See it? Which would show up, like I said, much better. Wasn't quite so variegated or quite so dark. So I really like this little shawl. I think very interesting to knit. You've got textured stitches going on throughout. Not a difficult pattern. You learn a few new things, and you get a really nice shawl in the end. So I wear it offset a little bit over to the side. See how instead of having this be right in the center, I have it over onto the left shoulder of the mannequin, and that works super well for me. And then this can just hang down. So there you go. The cool clavicle cover is the shawl of the week this week. Other side, and we're going to take a look at my little Bolero here that got a little wrinkled. It was on my shelf, and I tried to shake it out a little. So when I do my sweater class, I have a little soapbox that I stand on about every third sweater. So here's my soapbox. Can we just talk about sleeveless summer dresses again? You guys know I'm not a fan. I'm not a real fan of my arms, the back of my arms, and so I would just really like men designers in the world to not design sleeveless summer dresses for all the women in the world to wear to weddings. I think that it's, number one, cold, right? Cool clavicle cover, air conditioning in the summertime. So we get somewhere in this really cute little sleeveless dress and we're freezing. So we either have to have a shawl or we have to have a cover up. And sometimes a big shawl is just too much. And so I want the women designers of the world to step forward and say that some of us would like a summer dress with a short sleeve or even a 3/4 sleeve. Lightweight fabric, but with a little bit of a sleeve. So this particular Bolero is not necessarily the one that I would recommend for everyone to knit. It just happened to be one that I knit. And if you go in and put Bolero in Ravelry, you're gonna get a ton of responses. But here is the lace trim Bolero. It's by Gail Bunn, and Cody's bumping again. This is knit in DK weight, 23 stitches to 4 inches. It is a bottom up cropped eyelet, female fitted, positive ease, short sleeve, set in sleeve, little V neck, worked flat and written pattern. It is $6 on Ravelry, and it is a standard fitting raglan sleeve bolero with lace and eyelet armhole trim. This particular yarn that I used was a silk blend, and it was a little bit bigger than DK, but really drapey. So like super drapey at this gauge. I think I went up a needle size and knit it at a little bit bigger gauge. So it's a little more oversized. You can kind of see that, right? That it's not as fitted as some boleros would be, but it's a top down raglan, and literally you can knit the body of this in 2 days and have it ready for a wedding. Just super quick, knits up very fast. And then there's this lace edging all the way around the edge, which you would not have to do. You could just leave the edges raw if you wanted to, and continue to use this pattern. But lots of patterns out there have this little detail where you pick up around the edge and just do something. And so this one just sits kind of like, just like a little jacket. I grabbed a dress out of my closet today. It's kind of a Thomas Kincaid painting on your chest. But I kind of liked it. It's got that same painting all the way around the bottom. So anyway, I was just looking for a quick summer dress to grab out of the closet. And I don't have a lot that goes with light pink, but I used to wear this all the time. So I'm going to turn it around here quickly so you just can see how short it is. It's cropped in the back. See? Kind of hits at the low back a little bit. Could have been a little shorter. Could have left it a little shorter too. But perfect for taking to a summer wedding so that you don't have to borrow your husband's suit jacket. Raise your hand if you've been to a more formal event and had to borrow your husband's suit coat because you're cold, because you're so cold, because you have on a sleeveless dress and he's hot because he has on a long sleeve shirt and a tie and a jacket, right? Like, how come we can't get this right? Okay, stepping down off my soapbox. Everyone needs to have a little bolero in their closet. So pick a neutral color. Pick a color of some, like that. What is your favorite color? One of your favorite colors, because those are going to tend to be the color of dress that you're going to go with. So if you tend to wear a lot of purples and blues, then make a bolero that's purple and blue so that it will go when you're ready to go to an event. It will go with just about anything you wear. So, and especially if you're going to wear a little black dress, then it really doesn't matter, right? You can just put any color over it. Get a little black sleeveless dress and wear it to the wedding. Okay, enough about sleeveless. I'm not super self-conscious about my arms. I just think that when you get to be of a certain age, they're not quite as nice as you would like in the back. Even if you do some of those tricep push-ups a lot to try to firm that skin up, there's no furbing going on there in my life. Okay, I have a couple more things to talk about, but I'm going to take a quick break and grab something. Just a couple more things to talk about today. I have a giveaway winner for the 2 enamel pins that I had shown last time on the podcast, the iRock Knits and the Knit Cahoots pins, and the winner is Naughty Knitter 86. And she answered about her favorite summertime thing was watermelon, and she, I think, and her husband liked to eat watermelon, and then she put a picture in of her Belrose shawl. So that was really nice of you to do that. So when you see this on the podcast, then please send me your name and mailing address via a private message on Ravelry, and or email me at Cori@irockknits.com, and I will get those out in the mail to you. So congratulations to Naughty Knitter 86 for winning the 2 enamel pins. I asked Matt if my friend Matt, if he would come on the podcast and talk about men's sweaters. And so we are going to record that in the next 10 days because I'm going on a vacation late in August and I'm going to be gone for a week, and it happens to fall on my podcast week. So we are going to get that recorded, and then I'll have a podcast to put up while I'm on vacation, and I won't have to think about recording when I'm up in northern Minnesota. On the Gunflint Trail and visiting Isle Royale and Nana Bijou Lodge. So that will all be really fun, but will be probably pretty cell phone free or Wi-Fi free. So we've decided that we will get that recorded. Matt and I, and you will have a men's sweater menagerie of things to look at because Matt is an amazing sweater knitter. Okay, I had a question in the Ask Cori a podcast question thread last time, and I did answer it out on the forums, but I thought I would just touch on it here briefly. I had someone ask me, when I'm working with multiple skeins, how do I keep them from untangling? And I have several things that I do. So I don't know if most of you have seen these before, but this is a Lazy Susan for your knitting. You just put your cake right on it and you can knit right off of it. So this is called a Yarn Buddy. This particular one happens to be made by Sun Valley Fibers, George of Sun Valley Fibers. And he does all kinds of different beautiful woods. So they are differentiating, they're different in price based on the kind of wood that he uses. So if you are a wood lover, you can choose the wood that you want. But they just spin, and you can just knit. And I have a double. So if I'm working with 2 skeins of yarn in a shawl, especially in color work, where I'm pulling with 2 colors at the same time, meaning that I'm not doing all blue stripes and then all red stripes for a while, I will use this one more often. You can use it for any type of color that you're doing, but I tend to get this out if I'm doing color work where I'm alternating stitch color, because it just really helps to keep things separate. So that's one of the ways that I keep my 2 skeins from tangling. Another way that I do it, I have a basket that sits on my floor by my recliner, because I have a rocker recliner, you guys know, that I sit in to knit in. And it sits on the floor, and I will put 2 skeins in that, especially if something is already on this, because you guys know I have lots of whips. And I will just rotate the basket as I knit out of it. So if I'm knitting and the yarns are coming up off of the 2 skeins like this, and then they get tangled, I will just rotate the basket as I work on it. But I've also talked about, I believe on the podcast here, is that when you are knitting in the round, you are twisting your knitting. So you're going round and round and round and round, and you're twisting. So when you get to the end of your round, the best way to make things better on yourself is to move your knitting backwards before you continue to knit again. So if I wish I had something. If I'm knitting, let's say I'm knitting on this shawl, okay? So we're going to say that this isn't a circle, because I've hooked, and I'm knitting all the way around like this. Then when I get to here, I'm going to turn it back to the beginning in order to knit around again, instead of continuing to knit around and round, because every time I go around this, I am turning my yarn. I'm spinning my yarn, so my yarn can sometimes double back on itself, especially if it's highly plied. It will sometimes double back, and it will also wrap around other yarns that you are also working with. So your best bet is just to, if you're working on a circular needle, to turn it back to the beginning every time. Get in the habit of that, and you won't have that problem of constantly having skeins wound on each other. Because I will admit, I do like to untangle a good knot. If, I will sit and do it for 20, 30, 40 minutes. I don't mind sometimes, but it usually happens at an inopportune time, right? Not in the moment where you really want to have to sit and undo it. So I don't mind sometimes at knitting. If someone says I've got a real mess here, I will sit and untangle. I don't really mind doing it too much, but these are just some ways that you can keep things from constantly twirling on one another. Okay, let's get the hellos in this week. Hi to Morninglory, Wisconsin, Lee Gifford, who reached out again, Sharon, Quinn, Denise Norber, Tiffany Sharp, Amanda Cole, Joanne Goldenberg, Peg Oren, Chantelle McLeod, Diane Scott, Melinda ZR, Amy Blandford, Lisa Smith, Prudence N, Gregg, Olivia Manke, Eileen Tomaro, Bareiria, Janet Roberson, Julie MacGregor, Beth Hoskins, Melanie Cahoon, Sarah Benson, Rachel Weisenstein, Peggy Bork, Stephanie Haberman, Helen Paxford, Glenda Bathgate, June Clifford, Kimberly Robinson, Chris Osborne. Hi, Chris, and I did mess you up last week, so you get double O's this week, Chris, because I messed that up. Emily Doyen, Amy Mickelson, Beth M, Peggy Hoffman, 722, Pat Howes, Tina Kircher, Carol Morrison, and then some in real life folks with first names because it's quicker. PJ, Emma, Linda, Melanie, Mary B, Yarn Fashionista. Hi again. She's got a podcast, remember? Courtney Lancaster, Michelle from Knit Takes Two, Kelly M, and Kathy Goodman. We had a nice chat this week, Kathy, and I really appreciate you being here and sharing with me. And then so many of you were so kind about the podcast I did with Kylie that I just have to say, she can't deny me, can she? We look a little alike, we sound a little alike, both highly opinionated, quite forceful women. But I do think that after watching it back, we have a great respect and admiration for one another, and I think that's a little rare for some mothers and daughters. And I do not take it with anything but the utmost joy that she loves me and I love her. And, you know, of course we have had difficulties throughout the years, but when you turn 22 and you still like your mama, that means a lot. And getting her moved in this weekend was just really fun to see her excited about a space in a one-bedroom apartment in an old building. I gotta find out what year that building was built in. If I remember, I'll put a picture in because we picked up her key. And she's got hardwood floors in her whole apartment, and I just keep thinking the stories those floors could tell, right? Because this is an old building and really an interesting place to live, that part of St. Paul. Very, very fun. So people who reached out and made a comment on that podcast with the two of us: Emma, Ellen, Barb, Denise, Celeste, Julie, PJ, Amber, Maggie's Grace, Anne, Kathy Evans, Rerec M, Kathleen, Kathy G, Mama Got, Brenda B, Kristen P, Carol C, Melanie C, Gwen G, Sharon N, Taylor in South Dakota, Heaven's Peacemaker, and Connie S. So I do those real quick, but some of you went and made a comment both places, and that just means a whole lot. So remember, you can find me all over the internet as I Rock Knits. I have an I Rock Knits group on Ravelry, so you can come over and join us. But if you have a question to ask me, that's the place to do it. That's where I put the show notes every week, and I list everything I've talked about right there. I also list it underneath this podcast, as well as on my website, which is under construction, and I'm getting super excited to get that kind of up and rerunning this fall. I am teaching at a knitting retreat this fall that I have to tell you guys about. So I am going to be in Boyne Mountain, Michigan, and I am teaching for a Piece of You yarn shop. And if you are in that area, we are going to be staying in Boyne Mountain at a Boyne Mountain lodge or resort, and look at it. I was just so thrilled to see it. Knitting retreat at Boyne Mountain. Isn't that going to be fun? Okay, so it is from September 21st to September 23rd. 3 days of knitting and friends and fun. It includes your room, your swag bag, an interactive skein to skein game, which I'm doing, and a class. There is going to be other adventures that you can do, going to Stowed Hedge Fiber Mill, Wool and Honey Yarn Shop, or the Boyne Mountain Village. The early bird cost is already done. So the price has gone up slightly, but I think it's really reasonable for all of that. For it was originally $295 per person, and that's just not too bad for 3 days. So if you've saved a little money back, you have a little, nest egg maybe for some knitting things, go to A Piece of You, APIECE of You. I'll put it on the screen. That'll be easier. .com. And she's got under her yarn events, she's got the information for that. I have no idea if it's full or not. She and I have been going back and forth about whether or not I'm going to fly or drive. I can't quite figure that out. But I hope to see some of you there. That would be a really fun event for a nice fall getaway. If you have nothing planned for September and would like to come to a knitting retreat, that would be really fun to meet some of you. So put that on your list. I am teaching also in Racine, Wisconsin, the beginning of October 6th, 7th, and 8th. I think I'm coming in on that Sunday night and then teaching on Monday. So that is out there for you to take a look at on my website, and as well as for the Three Knitters River Guild, the Three Rivers Knitting Guild. I will be teaching on October 15th at their guild event. So I'll be in Wisconsin twice and Michigan here coming up. And the summer goes so fast, doesn't it? So take a look at all of those as opportunities for maybe a chance to come and take a class, or for me to meet you. Let's be real. I'm just asking so that I can meet some of you. Okay? A little shout out here. If you have not subscribed to this podcast, would you please do that for me? Just click the little subscribe button. It doesn't do that much to you, and it helps me be found by other people that are looking for knitting podcasts. And if you want a little notification of when it comes up, which is every other Tuesday morning, it should be in your inboxes. You can hit the little bell and get a little notification right down in the bottom of your screen, depending on where you're watching it. Sometimes on the TVs it doesn't show the little notification, but if you're on a computer, an iPad, or a phone, and you can listen to this podcast on your phone when you're driving around in the car. You don't have to see me in order to watch this podcast. So if you don't have time in your day, or you haven't had a chance to catch up on some of the older podcasts, just turn your phone on in the car and listen to it on Audible. I'll yammer on at you and keep you company. That's no problem. And sometimes when I get far behind on people's podcasts, that's what I do. I just listen to them in the car, even though they're audio. I just put on my YouTube and plug it in, and if you have it downloaded, you can listen to it there. So I think that's how I'm going to end this week, even though this is probably a shorter than normal podcast. With the rain, it's getting to be mid-afternoon, late afternoon here. I need to get groceries because we did not do that this weekend when we were moving and packing. And so one more way that you can support me is to buy a pattern or gift a pattern, and I really appreciate those who did that in the last 2 weeks, because a few of you did, and I could tell that I got a few more uptick in sales, and I make a few dollars on every pattern, so that's really nice. I will have a story for you next time, I think, because I'm saving it. It's a little much to share too much about my personal life over and over again on every podcast, because you guys would all be like, what is this, therapy? So anyway, I'm planning a vacation in the next couple weeks, so I got to plan my knitting, and I cannot wait to show you guys my Rhinebeck sweater. I have a design on the needles that has been in my mind for probably a year and a half, and it's a little over the top. But would you expect anything less from me? Let's remember to keep it colorful and waddle on.